Well, the saying, when it rains, it pours, comes to mind. Tupac Shakur's family hires powerhouse attorney to investigate Sean Combs. The news follow reports that the late rapper's family has tasked a team of investigators to ascertain any possible connection between Combs and Shakur's death. I'll be back. Hey, welcome everybody. Let me get into this. The family of Tupac has hired powerhouse attorney Alex Spiro to investigate any potential links between Sean Combs and the murder of Shakur. The news follows reports that the late Los Angeles rapper's family have hired a team of investigators to ascertain if the Bad Boy Entertainment founder had any involvement in his death. A rep for Combs did not immediately reply to a request for comment, but Combs has vehemently denied any involvement in the past. During the height of the East Coast West Coast hip hop feud, a 25-year-old Shakur was gunned down in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas in September '96. His murder has gone unsolved, but a break in the cold case came in September of last year when Compton Crips gang member Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was arrested and charged with Tupac's murder. Davis, who heads to trial in March next year, has made claims that Combs offered a $1 million hit on Tupac. Now, check this out. I found an article dated March 18th, 2008. The title is, "What Did Sean Puffy Combs Know?" Until his murder in '96, Tupac maintained that Combs, also known as P-Diddy, was connected to the '94 ambush of Tupac outside a studio in New York City. Reporter Chuck Phillips says Combs knows more about the violence than he stated. An unsolved crime from the '90s resurfaced this week as the result of some reporting done in Los Angeles Times. Again, this was in 2008. So it was the week of March the 18th. It's a tale that some believe has been chronicled through rap music. Let's start back with the 1995 track from Notorious B.I.G. that some believe is more than just a fictional tale of hip-hop thuggery. Soundbite of Notorious Big. Who shot ya? Separate the weak from the opsa. Leap hard to creep them Brooklyn streets. It's all bickering beef. I can hear sweat trickling down the cheek. Your heartbeat sounds like Sasquatch feet, thundering, shaking the concrete. Neighbors called the cops, said they heard mass shots. Saw me in the drop, 3 in corner, electrical tape around the daughter. Old school, new school. 3 attackers shooting somebody up in an ambush. Well, that's what happened to Tupac outside Quad Recording Studios in New York City back in '94. Shakur survived the attack. Biggie goes on to rap Bad Boys behind this. Now, whether that refers to the track itself, the attack, or something else entirely, who knows? Although Shakur thought he did know until he was murdered in '96. Tupac Shakur maintained that Sean Puffy Combs P-Diddy, then the head of Bad Boy Records, was connected with those '94 attacks. Here he is rapping at Puffy saying, "You and I know what's going on." Soundbite of Tupac Shakur. Let's be honest, you were pumping, you be seeing me with gloves, and you can tell the people you roll with whatever you want because you and I know what's going on. Payback. Yesterday, the Los Angeles Times published a web exclusive Reporter Chuck Phillips wrote a piece that may support Shakur's theory, although Combs denies it. More on that in a moment. But first, Chuck Phillips is up ridiculously early on the West Coast to tell us all about it. So he's talking to Chuck. Hi, how you doing? Then Stewart, this is the guy who authored the article. Doing great. Let's start with the beginning. Two of the guys who are allegedly responsible for setting up this 94 attack on Tupac, James Roseman and James Sabatino. Now, what was their relationship to Sean Combs to P-Diddy? Mr. Phillips responds, they were at the time. You have to remember, Bad Boy in 93 and 94 was just starting out. In 94, they just put out their first records by a guy named Craig Mack and Biggie. They just came out just before this happened, and these guys, Jimmy Henchman was James Roseman's name at that time. He went by that moniker. Jimmy Sabatino, they were guys that were in that kind of, in the Brooklyn, what you call like criminal underground. And they were moving into the rap world, as were a lot of people at that time. Out here we had Suge Knight and a lot of different people from the Blood Gang and Crip Gang, and all those people were trying to be involved in making music. So at the time, Jimmy was pretty much a guy from the streets who was trying to start a promotion company, and so was Jimmy Henchman. The two of them put together at that time a show called a convention used to be out called How Do I Be Down. It was like the main rap convention. So they were kind of just trying to break into being legitimate people. They weren't employed by Bad Boy, but they hung around with those guys because the association would be good for them in starting up. Now this is Phillips talking. Absolutely, it would be very good for them. And at the time, they were part of kind of hip thugs that were in that area, and they all hung out together. And you've got to remember, Bad Boy really wasn't much of a company then. It was just getting out a CD. Stewart speaking. Now, Roseman, Sabatino, are they the men that are believed to be allegedly involved in the attack in 94 outside the Quad studio, the one where Tupac was shot 5 times? Mr. Phillips responds, they were orchestrated. Wow. Check this out. What just came to my mind. Okay. In the video, the book, Kim says that Diddy orchestrated the hit or the contract against Tupac. I'm thinking about the words that was used. I know orchestrated is a common word, but for some reason when I read that word just now, it took me back to how Kim said it. Okay, let's continue. This is still Mr. Phillips talking. There's 3 different guys that actually did it. I don't name who they are because they've never been arrested. I was in contact with the individuals. Some people I know in New York, when I was working on a different story, kind of brought up 2 names, street names, and I kind of tracked them down, and through them I got to a number of people who were in the studio that night. And then I also got to some people I believe helped orchestrated. So they were not directly responsible. They didn't do the shooting or the pounding, but they hired the guys that did. And there was not supposed to be, at the time, they were supposed to give a beating. So he's saying that Tupac was just supposed to get beat, not shot. Stewart, right. It was like a fake robbery. They were going to try to take Tupac's, Mr. Phillips. They were going to fake a robbery. They were going to pistol whip him and, really hurt him severely in a beating, but nobody was supposed to shoot any weapons. The problem was that Tupac had a gun on him. He pulled his gun out. He accidentally shot himself in the groin right away, and then gunfire erupted and they shot him, I believe 4 times. At least that's what I was told. Twice in the head. Stewart speaking. And that's because Tupac had been not as excited about possibly working with Bad Boys and Combs as perhaps Combs and his people thought Tupac should have been. Mr. Phillips speaking. Exactly. Well, that's what people told me. You have to remember at this point, even at that night, Biggie and Tupac were friends. They were not enemies at all. They were aspiring stars, and Tupac was on his way. He already released an album and was almost done with the second album. He had been in a couple of movies, so he was the bigger star at that point. Only the people around Bad Boys' inner circle knew who Biggie was, and the record had just come out a couple of months before his first debut. So they were really good buddies at that point. Tupac invited him on stage sometimes at his concert. He let him sleep at his house. In fact, he kind of taught him a lot about rapping. He would never have, I don't believe at that moment, intentionally harmed Tupac. And I don't believe the other thing that I want to make clear here is that Combs did not order this thing. He was just told about it, as there is. He didn't have anything to do with it except that he knew it was going to happen. But the book says that Kim walked in on... Wait a minute. No, did he walk in? Did she walk in on him plotting the Las Vegas thing? Or... Okay, I don't know. I have to reread it or listen to the video. Let's go on. Stewart speaking. How did the information come to you that Combs and Biggie knew that this attack was planned before it happened? Mr. Stewart. Well, all right. Like I said, I've talked to people that I believe were involved in the orchestration of his attack. And I had contact with the assailants themselves. And I believe that Sabatino himself told Puffy or Sean Combs, whatever you call him. Stewart, whatever you call him. Mr. Phillips. He changes his name every couple of weeks or so. Yeah, he was. Let's go on. It's hard to figure that one out sometimes. Hey, Stewart talking. All right. We're talking to Chuck Phillips of the LA Times, a reporter who has some new information into the 94 shooting of rapper Tupac Shakur. Chuck's going to stay on the line with us. Stewart has come back from the commercial break. Thanks for listening to the Bryant Park Project from NPR News. We're going to continue our conversation with Chuck Phillips from the LA Times, who has written a piece that may support the theory of Tupac Shakur that Sean P-Diddy Combs knew about the attack on him outside of the Quad Studios where Shakur was shot, ultimately 4 or 5 times. Now, Chuck, as you know, Sean Combs has remade himself into a sort of a cashmere-wearing, Hamptons party-throwing businessman. And he vehemently denies this claim. His statement he put out to the press, "The story is a lie. It is beyond ridiculous and completely false." Doesn't it sound like what he was saying when everybody was coming against him last year and this year? Neither the late rapper Notorious B.I.G. nor I had any knowledge of any attack before, during, or after it has happened. I'm shocked the LA Times would be so irresponsible as to publish such a baseless and completely untrue story. Mr. Phillips is responding. I would tend to disagree with it. I think that Mr. Combs had the opportunity to talk to me twice before the story ran. I have talked to him in the past a number of times, and I stand by my story. Stewart speaking. James Roseman also says that he questions your chops on this story, basically saying that you've gotten some facts wrong in the past. Do you care to respond? Mr. Phillips. Yeah, I would. If you were to look at what he says in his statement, he says, I wrote a story 6 years ago about Tupac's shooting in Las Vegas. He claims that the reason I got the story wrong is that Biggie had gotten into an accident and couldn't have been there. Biggie didn't get into the accident until 2 weeks later. The facts that he uses were wrong. He's wrong about that. But you also have to, in the story that we wrote, what Mr. Roseman lawyer said, which is almost identical to his statement to the press, Stewart. So, for someone who's listened to all of this and is trying to figure out what actually happened here, can you explain why this event, this shooting, was seminal in East Coast, West Coast feud that ultimately turned very violent and led to the death of two talented men, Tupac and Notorious B.I.G.? Mr. Phillips speaking. Well, I've started off writing those stories because I was a music business writer and I wrote about the business. Then gradually, little by little, when gangster rap came in the early 90s, I'm a giant fan of black music. I love, almost all of my record collection is black. Wow. Gospel music, rap music, jazz music. And so I was immediately entranced by gangster rap, especially Dr. Dre at that time. The bass lines were great. Everything was great. So I kind of got involved. I started looking at these things almost as a fan of music more than a reporter. And little by little, it just became more interesting to me. And as the years have gone on, I write lots of different stories. I've written about all kinds of things, but this particular, the unsolved nature of these killings, and that is just puzzling and troubling to me that the government hasn't figured out who killed these two very talented men and others in the line of this. The other thing that kind of draws me to it that I'm curious about is this period in history. I don't think there's ever been a period in history where popular American artists competed on record and in interviews, and ultimately, Stewart took it to the streets. Yeah, took it to real life. LA Times reporter Chuck Phillips wrote about the 94 attack on Tupac. Thanks for sharing your reporting, Chuck. Mr. Phillips responds by saying, thank you. And again, that's the end of the article. What you just heard is a 2008 article about a reporter writing or investigating or looking deeper into the deaths of Tupac and B.I.G. And he basically suspected that Combs knew a lot more than what he was putting on. So now years later, it's all coming out in the wash. See, whatever you do in the dark always comes out into the light. I bet you Jay-Z is regretting all those mocking songs he made about Jesus Christ and God, huh? Thinking he was Jehovah. Yeah, let's see you get yourself out of this, Diddy and Jay-Z. So some of these folks like to believe they're gods on earth. Let me see you get yourself out of this. If you was a god, it wouldn't even be happening. What you're going through would be what mere mortal men go through, not gods, right? Okay, that's all I have for you guys. Like I said, whatever I find, whatever I discover that I believe you guys will find interesting, I will bring it to you. 10-4 over and out. Shutting down the shop. See you in the next video. Take care.